Good morning, coffee lovers. 1 second. Oh, that's better. Good morning, coffee lovers, and welcome back again to Barista Mentor. Today, we are going to talk about a French press, or a French press, or a cafetiere, or a coffee plunger, or a coffee pushy devicey thing, whatever we want to call it. We're going to talk about our tips and the way to make the best version at home in your own kitchen. Now, making a French press seems easy in theory, but as you know, coffee is quite the rabbit hole, so let's dive on in it. Let's pull this bad boy apart. It's quite simple, 2 parts. So you've got the actual plunger itself. In this technique, we're actually not going to use this, which just wait, stay with me, bear with me. And you've got the actual plunger, cafetiere, French press itself. So as you may or may not know, a French press is an immersion brew of coffee, which results in a very full-bodied flavor. Now, the reason it does this is because coffee is a soluble content. We're gonna add our coffee in and steep our coffee for several minutes. So it's gonna continue to try and extract those coffee solubles. So the longer we leave it, the longer the brew, the more it's trying to extract. Now, it's quite easy to over extract the French press because we'll leave it in there for too long and it will be quite muddy and quite bitter. The tips that I want to show you guys is to help get rid of some of that muddiness or some of that sediment that you might be left with at the bottom of your cup each morning. Before we get started on the brew, let me just quickly run you through what we're gonna need. As mentioned, you're gonna need your French press, a grinder. Freshly ground coffee is always the best version. So for hand grinder, electric grinder, whatever you got, that's great. We're gonna grind coarse, remember? A server or just a cup is fine. Set of scales to track the brew, a couple cuppy duppies, and just a kettle. Now, you don't need a fancy kettle, just the basic setup is fine. Just make sure you're using filtered water, of course. And lastly, we're gonna need a set of spoons. Ideally cupping spoons, but if you don't have them, soup spoons or a large tablespoon will be fine. That's gonna help us with our brew itself. Reminder, you can get all of this stuff on our little website down below. Check out the link. We've got this wonderful copper French press, hand grinders. Hope to have electric grinders live very, very soon as well. So check it out, guys. Let's get started now. The first thing we've done is we've boiled our water. Now remember, the hotter, the better in this case. And it's filtered, of course, and I've ground my coffee fresh. Now, we've ground quite coarse, so let's take a quick look at that, if I don't spill it all over the bloody bench. So quite coarse, and again, because we are doing an immersion brew, so it's quite important there. I'm covered in coffee. Before we start, I'm just gonna quickly preheat the French press. I'm just gonna add a little bit of water, get that nice and warm. Keep the temperature as consistent as possible. Give it a bit of swirl and just dispose of that. Off to the side. We're gonna tear our scales and add our coffee in. Working to a 60 gram to 1 litre of water ratio. I've got a little bit more than that. I've done 16 grams in the pot and I'm gonna brew about 250 mils. Because I have no friends, I'm having this coffee by myself. If you wanna be my friend, leave your comment. Or don't. Now, the coffee's in. I'm gonna start my timer and fill this to 250 mils. Now, I'm making sure that I'm gonna coat all of these grounds as much as possible with quite a quick pour. Straight up to 250, giving that a bit of an agitation as well. Not too much because it's gonna steep for a further 4 minutes. Right, so I'm at 250. I'm now gonna let that sit. I'm not gonna touch it for 4 minutes. Now this is the crucial stage of extraction. As you can see, the coffee is steeping in there, so it's going to continue to extract as much as it can. Now let's let that sit. You're gonna see the coffee form almost a crust on the top. After this 4 minutes, I'm gonna break this crust and scoop it off. Finally, I'm gonna leave my plunger thingo-dingo on the top, and I'm not gonna push it. Why? You think that's weird? Well, after this 4 minutes drops, you're gonna slowly start to see now that these coffee particles are slowly dropping to the bottom. Now, if we press the plunger, we're just re-stirring that. We're resurfacing all those grounds. We're starting the extraction process again. And worst of all, you're gonna end up with all those coffee grounds and particles in your cup. We don't want that. We wanna have a nice, clean, subtle, yet full-bodied brew. Now let's let this steep and we'll come back in a minute. In the meantime, I don't know, make some breakfast or call your friends. Someone call me. Alrighty, coffee lovers, coming up to 4 minutes now. What I'm gonna do is take my cupping spoon and just give that crust a break. Couple stirs, not too many because we don't want to keep over agitating that coffee. Now what I'm actually gonna do, take this off the scales. I don't really need them anymore, to be honest. And those particles are gonna continue to drop that last little bit. And I'm just gonna take off this top little layer, almost that forms like a little crust. By this stage, most of the coffee particles should have sunken. The few on the top is also just down to grind distribution because we're using, now I'm not making excuses, I'm not, I swear, but because we are using a hand grinder that has conical burrs, we have a slight distribution indifference. Now, as you can see, I've put the lid of the plunger back on the top and I've pressed it just down to where the water is. Notice I'm not gonna push through because that's now ready to serve. You could then let it steep for a couple more minutes if you want to let that coffee drop even more, but the top filter will obviously filter any of that coming out. So we're actually good to go, good to serve. Leave that lid on top, just hold it there, and you wanna pour this out straight away. Now, you wanna divide this up if you're doing a larger brew with your friends. Again, I'm by myself, so I'm just gonna pour it all out by myself into 1 cup straight away. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to keep coming back to this coffee as it sits. A lot of people would just let that sit and kind of continue to pour, but as you know, that's when it becomes quite sludgy in flavor, very bitter. You get a lot of sediment coming through as well. It's not very enjoyable. So that's all I'm gonna have. If you had a thermal server, you could pour it straight into there, of course, which would keep it nice and warm, but then we're good to go. Yeah, have a sip, have a scoop. Notice the color as well. You know, it's a little bit darker, again, because of the immersion brew. So you can kind of see that there. Do a nice little stir, make sure all those flavors are incorporated. But yeah, as the immersion brew is, you know, the coffee's sitting in there, it's a little bit darker, but still very tasty. Now I've got a much cleaner brew because I didn't re-plunge that, re-agitate the coffee, but a beautiful full body. Bloody good. There we have it. Easy as. Now you can test it out at home. Make sure you try our technique. Please let us know in the comments below. And if you did like it, make sure you give that little bell, little tickle, subscribe, and we will see you soon. Thank you very much. Adios.